Hi, welcome to AniRecapped. Today, I will explain a 2004 mystery fantasy movie called Howl's Moving Castle. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Sophie is a girl who lives in a mysterious land called Ingary. It is a place that looks like something from your dreams, or simply put like a fairy tale. Sophie is a hat maker, and one day at her work, she hears something outside the shop and notices a huge metal castle vanishing in the hills. It belongs to a wizard named Howl, who is known as the Heart Thief. He steals hearts of beautiful young women. Sophie later leaves her job and bumps into some soldiers who flirt with her. They become really annoying and Sophie backs up into an unknown man. He then sends the annoying ones away and offers himself to escort Sophie home. As they walk, he tells her not to be afraid because something is following him. Mysterious shadows then approach them, so he grabs Sophie and they leap high into the air. He then leaves Sophie and her sister's bakery, and says he must go to draw off his pursuers. Sophie's sister Letty then talks to her asking about what just happened. Sophie describes the encounter as a dream and later explains to Letty that the man must have been a wizard. Letty warns her about trusting wizards and reminds her Howl is the most dangerous of them all. Later, Sophie arrives back at the hat shop where a large and elegant woman enters through the door. Sophie tells her the shop is closed, but the woman starts insulting her and then she glides towards Sophie. It turns out she is actually a witch, and she covers Sophie with dark magic. She then leaves in the chair carried by figures that previously pursued her. When she looks up, Sophie realizes she has been transformed into an old lady. She is horrified with her new appearance, so she locks herself in her room and refuses to talk to her mother, who visits her the next day. Horrified and in shock, she decides to leave the town. She hears that war is starting because the prince of a rivaling country has gone missing. She heads for the mountains located in the waste area, where only witches and wizards live. She then stumbles upon a scarecrow and they form an instant bond. She names it Turnip Head, and it starts helping Sophie on her journey. As it was getting darker outside, Sophie asks Turnip Head if it knows any shelter that is nearby, and the scarecrow points her to Howl's castle. A little bit in shock, she still decides to enter the castle. She finds a comfy place and sits next to a fire, which immediately starts talking to her. The fire calls itself Calcifer, and it claims to be a powerful fire demon, and its master is Wizard Howl. It says that Sophie has been cursed with a powerful spell. However, it can help her with the curse if she resolves its problems. Calcifer claims to be under a strict regimen and it had enough of it. A boy called Markle then appears and he talks to the fire and Sophie. He wants to know if she is a witch, but their conversation is interrupted by a knock. He wears a magical disguise that makes him look old, and opens a door using a color-coded knob. Multiple colors are visible and each opens doors to different location. There is also a black one and only Master Howl knows where it leads. Later, as Sophie, Markle, and the fire were having a dinner, a black knob activates and the handsome stranger Sophie recently met appears. Calcifer introduces Sophie as his new cleaning lady, employed by Calcifer. They then have a dinner and Howl notices a message in Sophie's pocket. He wants to see it, and as soon as he touches it, it burns. An inscription from the Witch of the Wastes appears on the table. The message says that Howl's heart will soon belong to her. Howl then orders Calcifer to move castle further to the west and goes through the black door. Markle then inquires Sophie if she is working for the Witch of the Wastes, but she angrily denies it. Later they notice a pole sticking from a castle. It was Turnip Head, who is now also traveling with them in a castle. Markle suggests that Turnip Head is a demon, but Sophie says that, if that's true, he must be a good demon since he led her here. The castle then reaches a lake. Meanwhile, Howl is seen fighting in a bird-like form. Back at the castle, the door opens and Howl walks through, his wings drooping and his feathers scorched. He sits in the chair in front of Calcifer's hearth and, with difficulty, transforms back into his human self. Calcifer warns him that, if he continues to transform, it will be harder to become human again. Howl admits the war has been getting worse, and all wizards have been recruited to fight. He then decides to take a bath and accidentally notices Sophie sleeping, but in her young form. When she wakes up, she looks old again. Later he gets mad as Sophie telling her that she mixed up his bathing potions and that now he looks ugly. He says that he must look handsome because there is no point being ugly. He panics and yells he looks awful now. The room starts to shake and shadows stretch as Howl's body begins throwing out slime. Sophie now bursts and tells him she also suffered a lot, and runs out crying. Howl is tucked in and relaxing as Sophie enters and offers him some warm milk, which he politely declines. As she stands to leave, Howl invites her to remain. He adds that the Witch of the Wastes is on the lookout for him and admits that he is a coward for hiding himself. When Sophie inquires, Howl states that the witch was once quite attractive, and Howl pursued her only to discover that she was not. As a result, he fled. Howl later suggests that Sophie travel to the palace in Kingsbury, pretending to be Howl's mother, and tell the king that Howl is useless to him. Sophie hesitantly agrees and embarks on the journey with a dog, who she thinks is actually Howl in disguise. As she nears the palace stairs, two shadow men bearing the Witch of the Waste sedan chair approach her. The witch emerges and expresses gratitude to Sophie for delivering her message. The witch boasts that she has been summoned to visit Madame Suleiman, the king's sorcerer, for her magical abilities. Sophie inquires as to why, if the witch is so gifted, she does not remove her curse. Sophie is upset when the witch says that she only casts spells and cannot break them. They enter a lobby together and find a lone chair. Large lighting suddenly illuminate the lobby, producing shadows and sinister figures. The witch cries out as they form a circle around her. Sophie is led into a vast greenhouse by the dog, where she is presented to Madame Suleiman and her dog Hin. Hin isn't Howl, like Sophie previously thought. Sophie maintains the previous story, pretending to be Howl's mother and stating that he would be rather useless. Suleiman asserts that Howl will morph into the Witch of the Wastes if he continues to abuse his abilities for self-gain. The witch is then wheeled in, reduced to her natural state as an elderly woman, and stripped of her magic. Sophie rises and declares that she now understands why Howl refused to attend. Suleiman's summons were only a trap designed to deprive him of his powers. She asserts that while Howl may be self-centered, his motives are pure, and he merely desires freedom. As she speaks, her appearance gradually returns to that of a young woman. Suleiman smiles and explains that Sophie loves Howl. Sophie pulls back and falls back to old looks in response to the statement. Outside, a propeller craft lands in the grass, and a big man enters the greenhouse. Suleiman addresses him as Majesty and introduces him to Sophie as Howl's mother. The king informs Suleiman that he will be no more using magic to win the war. The real king then enters, and presents his future war plans. He smiles at the copy of himself, thinking it is Madame Suleiman's funny creation. But actually, it was Wizard Howl, surrounded with magic to look like the king. The king leaves, and Suleiman greets Howl, who removes his disguise and grasps Sophie, saying that he has fulfilled his oath and must be leaving. But Suleiman does not let him leave. The group is led away to an empty realm where the ground appears to be miles below. Suleiman comes above them and informs Sophie that she is about to demonstrate to her the true nature of Howl. The violent brawl then ensues across multiple locations, during which Howl assumes his alternate form. After the fight, they land into a craft, together with the witch and Hin. As they leave, Sophie wants to know why he bothered to make her go to the palace if he was going. He says that he is afraid of Suleiman, but Sophie's bravery has given him the guts to confront her. As they are pursued by the king's troops, Howl informs Sophie that he will grant her 5 minutes of invisibility and that the ring he gave her will guide her back to the castle. He then disembarks from the airplane on a replica in order to evade their pursuers. Sophie travels and sees the castle, but ignorant of how to land her craft, she crashes into the castle's mouth. They all crawl out of the debris unharmed, and Sophie meets Markle. While everyone is sleeping that night, Howl enters the room, slumped over and partially transparent. Calcifer cautions him about going too far. Sophie reawakens, having been transported back to her youth, and finds Howl's footprints on the feather-covered floor. As she enters Howl's room, she discovers a large tunnel. She continues into the tunnel till she encounters Howl curled up in his bird shape. She then confesses her love for him. Howl stands, displaying a grotesque face full of sharp fangs, and flies away as Sophie reverts back to old. Sophie then speaks with Calcifer and inquires as to whether Howl is truly a monster, to which it responds simply by stating that if he is extinguished, Howl will perish as well. Howl reappears later, looking normal, and he demonstrates to Sophie what he has done for her. He built her a room that was identical to the one she used to live in her hometown. Seeing everything, she regains her youth and is moved by Howl's kindness. Sophie begs him to stay and expresses her desire to assist him, despite her lack of talent or beauty. When Howl convinces her that she is attractive, she reverts to her old state. Suddenly a big battleship emerges. Howl, enraged by its presence, lightly motions and causes the ship to malfunction, cruelly transforming and feathering his arm. They are then attacked, so Howl starts flying and drops Sophie to safety. The witch informs Sophie that she is aware she is in love and that her sighing has revealed it. Sophie inquires as to whether the witch has ever been in love, to which the witch joyously responds that she has and simply cannot ignore the hearts of gorgeous young men. The next day, the town gets bombarded, so Howl rushes to help. He now has a purpose, which is to defend Sophie. She then goes outdoors to observe the conflict, and sees Howl, who looks like a monster. She stands there in horror as the ship plummets to the bottom and explodes in a fireball. Sophie begs Calcifer to assist him, but he declines, stating that he is too weak and requires something of hers to get stronger. They exit the castle and it collapses. Both Howl and Calcifer are losing their powers. Sophie then gives Calcifer her braid. He gets stronger and goes into action. Strong again, Calcifer rebuilds the castle and rushes to aid his master. At this point, the witch suddenly realizes that Calcifer has Howl's heart. Blindly motivated by her crush, she takes it and holds the heart close to her. The castle trembles and stumbles, as the witch catches fire and screams in the heat. Calcifer screams as his abilities are drained, and Sophie attempts to wrest him away from the witch, but she would not let go. Sophie throws water over them in her distress, extinguishing the flames. Then the piece of the castle on which Sophie is standing separates from the rest. Sophie regains consciousness after surviving the wreck, and she sobs, wondering if she murdered Howl by pouring water on Calcifer. She buries her face in her hands as the ring Howl handed her begins to vibrate, revealing a solitary ray of light. Sophie inquires of the ring whether Howl is still alive, and it points to the collapsed main door. She opens it and enters, him trailing behind. Sophie then finds herself in Howl's home, and travels outside to the fields, where she encounters a young boy, learning the doorway was a portal to Howl's youth. Sophie sprints towards the young Howl and sees him catch, speak to, and swallow a star. He coughs and exhales a beating flame from his chest, Calcifer. Sophie is thrown into a deep darkness as the ring on her finger breaks. Sophie and Hin return through the doorway to find Howl, a nearly complete form of a monster bird, waiting for them. Sophie approaches him and kisses him, brushing the feathers from his face. She requests that he take them to Calcifer, and Howl departs. They arrive at the walking castle, which has been reduced to 2 walking legs holding a single piece of floor, where Markle, the witch, and Turniphead are waiting. Howl collapses immediately upon their arrival, and the feathers disintegrate to reveal his human flesh. Sophie then turns to the witch and tells her to give her Calcifer. Though she initially refuses, she eventually relinquishes him to Sophie upon her appeal. Calcifer informs Sophie that he is really tired but may be well if Sophie is the one who returns Howl's heart. She smothers him against Howl's chest. Calcifer becomes free and leaves. With Calcifer gone, the castle collapses into the deep. Turniphead slows it down and saves the group. Sophie kisses Turniphead, proud of his sacrifice, which leads him to transition into a person. He bows before Sophie and declares that he is the missing prince from a nearby country. A curse turned him into a scarecrow, and only a kiss from his true love could set him free. As Howl awakens and complains of a weight on his chest, Sophie informs him that a heart carries a great deal of weight. The witch advises the prince to return home and bring a stop to the battle. As the prince departs, Hin sends a visual message to Suleiman, who accuses him of being a traitor for joining forces with Howl's group. Calcifer reappears and ignites into a flame, informing Sophie that he has missed them, and Howl constructs a new flying house for them all. The witch sits in the courtyard while Markle and Hin play, and Sophie and Howl share a romantic kiss at the castle's bow. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like. It takes only a second, but it means everything to us. Have a great day and see you in the next video.